So, good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be reading through The Souls of Black Folk, specifically focusing on Chapter 1 titled Of Our Spiritual Strivings, written by W.E.B. Du Bois. So, before we get into the reading, I just wanted to give you some background information on him and explain why he is significant. So, he was the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard in 1895. He was the editor of The Crisis magazine, which was the official publication for the NAACP, and it told of the dangers of prejudice and injustices faced by Black people. He was also the co-founder of the NAACP, in which he served in a multitude of capacities and roles. And notable works of his include The Souls of Black Folk, written in 1903, which we will read later, as well as The Philadelphia Negro, written in 1899. Toward the end of his life, he immigrated to Ghana to create an encyclopedia for the African diaspora, and he was personally invited by Ghanaian president at the time, Kwame Nkrumah. So before we begin to dive into the reading, I just wanted to give you some keywords and themes so you can frame your thinking and better understand what we're talking about in the text. So some keywords are assimilation, the race problem, the Negro problem, integration, and themes to remember are the idea of slavery to freedom, education, and exclusion to inclusion. So the very first line of this text is the essential point of the passage. It sums up what Du Bois is trying to say. So he says, between me and the other world, there's ever an unasked question. Unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. And this question is, how does it feel to be different? Du Bois goes on to say that white people skirt around the problem instead of directly asking him the question of how it feels to be a problem. Du Bois says that he didn't recognize that he was a problem until he was in grade school, when they were exchanging visiting cards with one another, and a girl refused his card because he was Black. And again, this is the first realization that he is different or a problem in society. So right here, I circled the word veil because this is a recurring metaphor that Du Bois uses to describe the idea that Black people are viewing themselves through the lens of white people, and that Black people are on one side of the veil and white people are on the other side, and Black people conduct themselves in a manner through white people. Du Bois says at first he didn't have a desire to dismantle this veil, and that he disregarded it by trying to be better than white children, by getting better grades or by running faster. But he loses this contempt when he realizes that even though he is being better, he still isn't afforded the same opportunities that white children are. On page 9, he says that other Black students became subservient to white society, or they developed a kind of hatred for it, saying, "Why did God make me an outcast and a stranger in mine own house?" He also says, "The shades of the prison house close round about us all, walls straight and stubborn to the whitest, but relentlessly narrow, tall, and unscalable to sons of night." This shows the division and unfairness between Black and white people in society, and the idea that Black people are imprisoned by a white society and will always view themselves from the white perspective. And this is the idea of double consciousness, which we will come back to later. In this gray box is an explanation of the veil metaphor that we spoke about earlier. He says it is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. Bois also says that one ever feels his two-ness, an American and a Negro. So these are two conflicting identities, and Du Bois is essentially posing the question of how they can coexist with each other harmoniously in society without compromising the identity of the other. And to what I just said, he expands upon that by saying he simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both a Negro and an American without being cursed and spit upon by his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face. So this elaborates on the challenges that Black people face by having to exist in this double consciousness. One, they have to appease white society while also staying true to themselves and to Black society. So Du Bois says that when Black men stop striving to assimilate to white society, that their talents are wasted or unseen. And this promotes the idea that Black people are weak or lazy and not to the standard that white people are. He explains this by saying these powers of body and mind have in the past been strangely wasted, dispersed, or forgotten. The powers of single Black men flash here and there like falling stars and die sometimes before the world has rightly gauged their brightness. So again, the idea that Black people are not enough if they don't assimilate to white society. So here I've highlighted different identities. So the Black artisan, the Negro minister or doctor, and the Black savant. And Du Bois uses these figures to exemplify how Black people face double aims, and that each figure is torn between Black and white audiences. And when they have contrasting identities, they have contrasting purposes as well. And so this can lead people to essentially follow false gods and follow a false means of salvation. So they're contrasting so much that they're following a false path. Du Bois also says on page 11, slavery was indeed the sum of all villainies, the cause of all sorrow, the root of all prejudice. Emancipation was the key to a promised land of sweeter beauty. And so this is the idea that Black people at one point in time thought that emancipation was the end all and that they would receive justice by being free. And Du Bois says that this is not possible because America hasn't recognized the legacy of slavery. And because of that, Black people will never be truly free and they aren't truly free. And this has created a sense of disappointment from Black people. At this end paragraph, Du Bois gives the hardships that Black people have faced since emancipation, stating war, the KKK, the lies of carpetbaggers, the disorganization of industry, and the contradictory advice of friends and foes. He also exemplifies the thought process that Black people believe the key to justice was voting and education. Also, he says that Black people were not afforded the same education that white people have been able to gain. And so even then, when searching for education, Black people face a sort of self-reflection. And in this reflection, they've become ashamed of the ignorance of their people, so the lack of education and the poverty surrounding them. And so, again, this reiterates the veil because they view themselves as poverty stricken, as ignorant, because that is what white people have placed onto them. And so, after seeing this so much, Black people sort of begin to believe it, and they have this idea that white people are superior because they do not face the inequalities between education and between poverty. So Black people as a whole have this idea that white people are superior because they view themselves through the veil of whiteness. And so, to that point, Du Bois says to be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor race in a land of dollars is the very bottom of hardships. So, again, the idea that kind of white people are superior. So, this is where Du Bois begins to pose a solution on how to exist in society as Black and American. He says, to be really true, all these ideals must be melted and welded into one. And the ideas that he spoke about on page 14 says, not in opposition to or contempt for other races, but rather in large conformity to the greater ideals of the American Republic. This is the solution that he poses because he says there is no true American music but the wild, sweet melodies of the Negro slave. So, what he's saying is that America is a melting pot that was built on slavery and on um, built with Black people's culture. And so the best solution is for Black people is to one, adapt or assimilate to the American ideas while also influencing them with Black culture. And together it would kind of fuse and place Black people into society and make them proud of their Blackness.